Hello, everyone, and welcome to ATL Falcons UK. This week, Cal and I are joined by former Falcons reporter Will McFadden. Not only former Falcons reporter, I'm sure we're going to find out what adventure he's on next, but I'll let Cal get started with questions, and I'll just make sure your comments are coming in and everything.
No worries. We'll start a bit about obviously yourself before we get onto the Falcons. So I think you went to Georgia University. You start off there.
Yeah. Went to the University of Georgia. I played rugby while I was there for their rugby team, outside center. So I'm sure your audience knows probably a bit more about rugby than Americans do. But we ended up making here there are only really a few like D1 rugby schools. So club level was kind of the highest level in the SEC. So we did make it to the NCAA tournament one year, my junior year, played against like Tennessee, Florida, all those different schools. So that was a fun experience. But outside of that, I majored in journalism and political science. And after graduating, I went to work for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is kind of the big paper here in Atlanta. I'm sure you guys probably know like Orlando Ledbetter, Jeff Schultz used to work there, Mark Bradley, all those guys. So I got the opportunity to kind of work alongside them. Then I went and covered college football for Saturday Down South for a year and a half, and then got hired by Falcons and got the opportunity to cover kind of the hometown NFL team for 4 years. Learned a lot there, but yeah, I mean, it's been weird reflecting on kind of how far I've come, because while you're in it and while you're doing it, you're not necessarily like taking a second to take a look around, but it's been awesome.
Yeah, it seems like a lot has moved like in such, because you're still young, and it's like you've done so much in such a short amount of time, really, when you think about it. And like obviously going back, you're like, God, I'm only this age and I've already done so many things already.
Yeah, no, it's been weird because like I've always been thinking about what comes next. What do I want to accomplish? What's the future got in store? And so I do think it's been a little bit of an important and welcomed lesson to kind of, again, take some time, stop, look around, smell the roses a little bit, because there are so many people who want to do what I've already done, and I'm really fortunate and blessed to have gotten the opportunity to do what I've been able to do.
Absolutely. I mean, we're an extremely informal version of what you've already achieved. so I'm pretty jealous of that.
No, this is great. And this is my favorite part about like coming on all of these things, because I grew up a Falcons fan. I still consider myself somewhat that. Yes, I've got like a professional obligation to do certain things, and I have to be a little bit objective. But I mean, in 2016, the morning of the Super Bowl, I was just blasting "Welcome to Atlanta" in my house for like 24 hours straight. So like I grew up watching this team, and I love this team, and I love to have these conversations, because that's ultimately what sports is all about, is these types of conversations, building intercontinental relationships and friendships because of a shared mutual passion. So you guys are really doing just as much as anybody in my position.
It's a bit of an odd one. We didn't know there were this many Falcons fans over here, but as soon as we made the account, within weeks, it was like, oh, there's loads of us. So it's been a good platform to base it off. And obviously we get the opportunity to speak to yourself and a couple of players in the past and things like that. So it's a really welcoming community. So I imagine you probably felt that whilst working with the Falcons at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
Just as a bit of a side note, you can see that James has now joined the chat. He's a couple of minutes late, but it's no matter at all. All I was going to move on to next was, so obviously you briefly touched over, you got the opportunity at the Falcons. How did that come about, and what was that feeling like, getting that opportunity at that stage in your career?
Man, that's one of my like favorite kind of stories, because I think growing up, you always kind of hear the cliche where like opportunity is where like luck meets preparation. And I feel like that's exactly what this was for me, because I, working with Saturday Down South at that point was obviously trying to land something a little bit more substantial, a little bit more reputable and things like that. And I was currently like job searching, trying to find a more stable place. but nothing was really kind of landing. Nothing was really sticking, as I'm sure everybody in their life has experienced with a job search. It's just a slow grind at times. And I was really actually considering getting out of journalism. It was just kind of one of those things where anybody who's wanted to get in this field, I feel like at some time has heard, well, that's a dumb idea, from somebody, because it's not a growth industry, I guess I will put it that way. So I was actually looking at kind of getting out and just doing something else, something a little bit more reasonable, probably. And then I got a phone call. Exactly. Yeah. Something a little bit more normal, coat and tie, go to work, 9 to 5 type of thing. And then I got a phone call one day out of the blue for a position that I guess I had applied for a year prior. And it was Matt Tabik, my boss. And he had just been hired from CBS Sports to lead the digital team, or the editorial team with the digital team in Atlanta, and talking to me about how they wanted to do things differently from all of the other NFL teams and how they run their media stuff. They didn't want it to be just kind of the traditional in-house, we're going to tell you the news, but really we're not going to compete with the AJC. We're not going to compete with ESPN. We're not going to compete with all of the other major players. And so he was brought there to try to change that. They wanted more of an editorial, real life background. So they went for a guy at CBS Sports, and he picked up my resume and gave me a call. And so then after a pretty lengthy interview process, and I know that I probably wasn't his first major choice. There were a lot of other people who were probably more qualified than me, some of whom are my friends who I know personally are better than I am. But circumstances fell my way, and I was given the opportunity, and I tried every single day to do it to the best of my ability. And I think I've grown a lot, and I think I earned the role that I was given, but it was definitely fortuitous at the start there. And so again, like when I say that I'm reflecting on how much of a sliding doors moment that probably was in my life, like, it was pretty crazy.
Well, that's what it's all about, I suppose.
Journalism. So,
go on, James.
I know about the journalism thing. I studied journalism for my degree, so I know it's not a growth industry, which is why I went into marketing.
There you go.
Well, it's clearly worked out for the best in both circumstances. So it's one of those, isn't it? It's one of those.
For sure.
Just a little bit more about yourself before we completely do your head in, and we'll move on. Have you got anything on the horizon? Have you got any set, have you got something in mind that you're targeting, or are you just playing it by ear and letting it all roll out?
I mean, I'm still just kind of looking around. I want to make sure, because I was so fortunate to kind of have this opportunity, I want to make sure and be really patient with the next opportunity and try to, capitalize on the experience I've been given. I don't necessarily want to just jump at the very first thing that comes. But that being said, like I'm still trying to stay active as much as I can. I started kind of a newsletter, and you can obviously I'm still trying to be active on Twitter. I'm diving into a lot of the NFL draft stuff, which I personally just love to do, but I'm sure I'll try to find ways to write about that coming up. And then stuff like this, like I love just getting the opportunity to continue to talk, because the best part about that job was having these conversations and getting paid for it. Like just throughout the work day, talking about football 24/7. And, even in kind of the business meetings that you would have, it was, all right, here's what's coming down the pipe. We got the draft coming up. What are we going to do? What's our draft plan? Or what are we covering? All of this stuff, And then a lot of times those conversations would turn into, using this year as an example, should we take a quarterback at 4? Should we trade back? All of it just like naturally devolved from how are we covering this to football opinions, because that's how these conversations always turn out. So that was my favorite part. And it's why I love to continue to do stuff like this, because I'm just so used to having these conversations every single day. And now my wife is about to divorce me because I won't shut up about football with her.
I think we're all like that over here.
There you go.
I think even since we've created this account, I think especially mine and Danny's missus are like, "Oh, you're on your phones all the time, Twitter." It's just like, well, it's hard to get out of it when you're in.
It is.
It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. But no, that's awesome. Just as a side note, if you do feel like you need to plug anything partway through the conversation, if you've got any links that you want to give out, just feel free to drop them. We won't single them out.
Yeah, I mean,
Greg has
really,
now
it's just
joined
my
us
Twitter account. But
yeah,
that's it.
Of course.
Yeah. What's up, Greg?
Greg has joined us. We'll tie on to.
Yeah, I jumped
Greg.
into in the middle of a conversation there. I didn't want to. Didn't want to interrupt. How's it going, man?
Huh? It's going well.
Good. No,
The weather's finally picking up here.
No
It's
lie,
been
man.
really cold. Yeah.
No, I can agree on the wife front, man. Like, especially this time of year when there's no game, she's like, "Why are you still reading about this? Like, this is when things happen."
I love it. Perfect timing to move on to Falcons chat anyway now. So I'll let Cal get us kicked off with that. And it's less interview of you now, Will, and more just general conversation. So you're not on the spot quite as much.
We'll start with last year, just so we can do a brief chat over it. Obviously, you was in the building quite a lot with obviously being a reporter there. Like, what went wrong so bad, or what was your perspective of it?
I mean, how
long have we got?
Yeah.
I do think it's really tough to tell because obviously last year was a weird year for so many off-field reasons. You know, I do think that they probably did take a really hard look at, you know, from the end of 2019 preparing to go into 2020, what can we change to get off to a faster start in the season and get off to a faster start in games? That was such a big issue in 2019, and they felt like they had solved that problem. And so throughout training camp, they wanted to create more of a competitive kind of feel, do more scrimmages, things like that. You saw there was a little bit more like intensity in how they were going about stuff, but because of all of the COVID stuff, you know, it really kind of put a cap on some of the changes that they probably could make. And I think that you saw that the first 4 games, when you just took a look at the schedule, were going to be a slog anyway. Like the Chicago game was really probably the only one that somebody would sit there and circle and say, okay, that's a game that we need to win. But Seattle, Dallas, and Green Bay were all kind of expected to be contenders in it. So my whole thought process was, if you can just be 2-2 in those first 4 games, then you probably feel pretty good about the rest of the season. The only thing that I did not want to have happen was be 0-4. And unfortunately, that's where they were. But the way they got there was so weird, and it was so different from game to game that it's easy to sit there and kind of say like, well, our run defense sucks. If you've got one glaring issue, that's a much easier patch, because the way that you go into games and the way you start game planning, you can mitigate one aspect if your team just has one leak in the boat. And you can say, okay, we need to start playing the games differently. When you plug one leak and then another one pops up and then another one pops up, and then you're putting yourself in position, and then you don't go get an onside kick. And then you're putting yourself in position, and then, you know, one member of your secondary has the wrong leverage on a play and it ends in a touchdown. And now you've got a minute left to try to score, and then you throw a pick. Like, the way they were losing the games was so weird. I mean, the Todd Gurley touchdown at the end of the Lions game was such a summation of the season. And it's so hard to just put your finger on one reason, because it wasn't one reason. And so I think if I was ever a coach, and I'm never going to be, but that would be like the stuff of nightmares, is like, what do we even focus on? Because for years, Dan Quinn, when they were having red zone problems or problems on third down, would say, well, we're implementing different sessions in practice. We're going to emphasize those areas much more. And they would change the way that they were practicing to really highlight certain areas. But I don't know what you do when it's the routine stuff that's just letting you down at the exact wrong time to cost you games. And so I think I think it was a little bit of a sense of just like, what do we even do here? And I do think there was a little bit of the depth on the team kind of took a hit over the years because they did prioritize some of the big name players. And so, in the Dallas game, when you lose 4 or 5 players on your defense, and all of a sudden you've got rookies in there and you've got just your second and third string guys, like that played a little bit into it as well. And it was just, I mean, I really think it was just a mix of really bad luck, some coaching mistakes, obviously, but then just some player depth issues that crept up throughout the season in certain spots as well. But all of that makes for a 4-12 season.
But according to Falcons Twitter, if we would have cut Matt Ryan, we would have won 12 or 13 games. So, like,
Matt Ryan's not the issue. Matt Ryan has never been the issue. I'm sure you guys all saw that like GIF of the Madden quarterback like falling and throwing like backwards basically and hitting the receiver. Like that was so perfect. Whoever was just like, this is what all Falcons fans expect from Matt Ryan. I mean, it's wild. Just appreciate him before he is gone, because that day is unfortunately closer than it is further away.
And that's what we keep talking about, because that's all anyone wants to talk about right now is, are we taking a quarterback at 4, right? And that's what we need to do. And people are so convinced that if you draft a quarterback in the top 3, you're getting an MVP. And it's just not the case. Like, we really struck gold with him, and people just do not accept that. And with every day we get closer to the draft, I'm hearing that any quarterback with no NFL experience is a better option than what we've had. And it's just mind-boggling to me.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the tweets that like Ian Rappaport or whoever's been putting out, where it's like, or Albert Breer maybe, like there are no first-round quarterbacks from 2009 to 2016, like with their team. And it's like Matt Ryan is the last quarterback that's happened to, and that right there points out how difficult it is. And it's about probably like a 50% success rate, but even a success is Jared Goff or Carson Wentz. I mean, a quarterback who's with your team past their first contract would be probably considered a success. Joe Flacco is not with the Ravens. Like, he won a Super Bowl with them and is no longer there. And Matt Ryan is one of the few quarterbacks who can even be in the conversation with Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees, Tom Brady. Like, he's not that level, but he's in the conversation with them, and is probably last on the list of like greats from this era, but he's still on the list of greats from this era. He's there with Phillip Rivers. I mean, those guys. So yeah, he's not the problem, but I do think you can have that conversation and then also objectively look and say, okay, what makes sense for the Falcons at 4? Does a quarterback make sense?
Yeah.
And there is a strong argument to be made that yes, a quarterback makes sense if you look at the strength of this class, because it lines up that I think quarterback is probably the strongest position, certainly in the first round, maybe in this draft. And this is the first opportunity you've had since you drafted Matt Ryan to be in the top 5. So you can say, should they take a quarterback? And the answer can be yes. And then you can say Matt Ryan is still a very, very good quarterback in this league and is not the issue. It's all about how do they want to manage the present and the future.
Yeah.
If you were to take a quarterback at 4, who would it be?
Well, it obviously depends on who's there. It's
not going to be Lawrence, so
it's not going to be Trevor. Who actually got the opportunity to interview when he was coming out of high school, so that was kind of fun. But I really actually like the top 4. I like all of them. I really do. I think for different reasons. I do think people are being a little harder on Justin Fields recently, because I think it's a scenario where when you have success early and you kind of show not what your ceiling is, but you give people a pretty good idea of how high your ceiling can be. At that point, people want to look and see where's your floor, and they start to nitpick a little bit more. And so all of a sudden people pay more attention to your bad games than they do your good games, because they've seen your good games. They know, okay, this guy can play really, really well, but can he play consistently? And so when you have a negative play, it's a knock against you. And I think that's kind of the case with Justin Fields, where the thing you hear about him is like, he's got sky high talent. This guy can be elite through the roof. All the stuff is there, but he's got some real clunkers on his resume. And it's like, okay, but kind of who doesn't? Trevor Lawrence is the next Andrew Luck because he doesn't have those. But every quarterback outside of those two guys kind of has those things that you can question. I was very down on Josh Allen when he was coming out of the draft. I'm an idiot for that because Josh Allen has gotten so much better, and he's much closer to his ceiling than he was his floor. The same thing could be true about Justin Fields. It could be off. Like that's the thing with quarterbacks in the first round is it really matters on where you land as much as it is your own talent. Baker Mayfield is a great test case for this. I think in a Kevin Stefanski offense, they're doing the things that he does really well. I think that Arthur Smith is a smart enough coach to know and put guys in a position to really succeed. And I think the scheme that he uses is a very quarterback-friendly scheme. We saw that with Ryan Tannehill. But I like Justin Fields a lot. I think Zach Wilson has some of the most intriguing raw talent of anybody. I remember reading a piece where it was kind of like the top quarterbacks in the NFL, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, those guys all played like shortstop or second base on their high school baseball teams. And you can see it with the way they throw the ball. They've got kind of that the arm slots can change and they can just get it really out really quickly. And he's that to a T. I mean, if you just watch any of his film, he has really good pocket presence. He just buys himself time in the pocket like Patrick Mahomes does, but he doesn't have to backpedal 7 yards to do it. And then he's got both a rocket, but he's got good touch and he can get the ball out in an instant. And then Trey Lance, I see a lot of the same things I do kind of with Justin Fields. But obviously the big question with him is the level of competition and just kind of the number of games he's played. He's only played something like 17 games, but the dude can make every single throw. And he's got, again, as high of a ceiling as anybody. I mean, he could be Matthew Stafford. He could be Josh Allen, but he could probably also never really develop into the guy that you want him to be. He could be Carson Wentz in a few years. So I like all of them. If you're going to take any of those guys, like there's the tools there to work with, which I know is a little bit of a cop-out answer. I mean, so I guess if I'm at 4 and let's say Fields and Lance are still on the board, I'd probably go Fields just because I'm always going to tend to lean towards a guy who's done it. Like I don't know why Deshaun Watson fell in the draft, but I'm like, this is a guy who's beaten Alabama on the biggest stage and has played on the biggest stage for 3 straight years. Like, just let's take that guy. Because at some level you got to succeed and show that you can succeed because winning is a mindset and it's contagious. So take that. I kind of thought the same thing about Russell Wilson when he was coming out. It's like, all right, this dude's won at NC State and Wisconsin. Just take winners. Justin Fields has won. I mean, so I would probably lean towards him if it's between him and Lance. Now, if Wilson is on the board, that's a little bit probably more of a toss-up for me, but I'd be happy either way.
So judging off that, you're not really for trading back? Are you taking at 4 definitely then, or are you assessing the opportunity as the picks ahead of you are selected?
I think I'm assessing the opportunity. Because what this will come down to is what do Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith think? It's really like, and those guys, all of the scouts that are in the building, Anthony Robinson is somebody who I have great respect for and is really good at his job. Those guys have much more of an idea about what these players can do and accomplish and the scheme that they want to try to run. I mean, Arthur Smith could sit there and say, no, I need somebody who can be really mobile, or mobility is not a big deal. I need somebody who can throw the ball down the field, or a big arm's not the most important thing. I need somebody who can put the ball exactly on a penny, right where it needs to go. And so the way that they prioritize that skill set may make them say, all right, Trey Lance, even though everybody else is talking about him, he's off our board. Or Justin Fields, he's off our board. Or just much further down in the draft. And also, what are other teams thinking and what are other teams saying? So if they view this as kind of like a 2 quarterback draft and it's Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson, and those 2 guys go at 1 and 2, I mean, trade down 100% because there are so many quarterback needy teams right now, and you're in again, if it's a 4 quarterback kind of top tier, you're at 4. You're the team where that's the last opportunity for another team to get a quarterback. So you're almost kind of in the pole position from that aspect. And you're going to be fielding a lot of offers, and that stock could really be rising for the number 4 pick. So I'm all for, trading down to 6, 7, 8. I mean, 8 would be weird because it's the Panthers, but I mean, even 12 or whatever. Drop down, try to grab 3, 4 more picks because they're going to need as many rookie players on this roster as they can.
Absolutely.
I think
I'm a little,
Greg, or
go on, James.
I was gonna say I'm a little confused as to the knocks that Justin Fields is taking right now, because and even like from a competition standpoint, Trevor Lawrence plays in the ACC. I know he beat Alabama in his first year, but he's gotten smacked around in the playoffs after that. It's not like they played Notre Dame this year, which wasn't exactly a a crack out game. I know he's got the tangibles. I know he looks like the next big thing. But if you want to talk about a competition standpoint, this guy breezed through college with only having to play a couple of games that were of quality, And I'll say this, and he'll be rookie of the year, and he'll throw 5,000 yards or some crap. Like, I know how this works. But I'm tired. I usually love this time of year, and I still do. But I'm so tired of knocking on these kids for this guy doesn't play anybody. This guy does. There's a stigma on Ohio State quarterbacks. Like all of the, but that doesn't stop Justin Fields from winning rookie of the year either. So I guess this time of year is kind of exhausting if you stay on Twitter too long. Yeah. But I don't know. I had that in my head, and I've never actually verbalized it. But yeah, Trevor's great, but Trevor's still not throwing an NFL pass either. So me personally, I'm all about trading down. We know Matt Ryan can throw a touchdown. Oh. So at least right now, anyway.
Well, I think the big. No, go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, I think anyone that does get traded, whether it be a quarterback, is going to be buzzing with the opportunity anyway. You're working under Matt Ryan for a season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, give or take, however long it takes to transition. Yeah, some of them are probably more NFL ready than others. Even in the top 4, some are slightly more ready to step straight in. But your opportunity is to play with, like you said earlier, Will, one of the best quarterbacks of this generation, and that he's phasing out. Even for Fields, so Fields is more mobile and more physical, but that means that under Matt Ryan, he could hone his skills in terms of throwing it deep and throwing it in the pocket and everything more. So that makes him a more complete player. So it'll benefit whichever quarterback we go for, really.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing, first off, is it would kind of suck for Matt Ryan. Like it would break my heart a little bit for him, just the human being, because nobody wants to be basically told, hey, your years here are limited. And that's kind of the message that it would send a little bit. And he's started his family here. He has 2 sons. This is home for him. And I guarantee you that he still believes he's got 4 or 5 years of really good football left in him. And he works very hard to be that way. But if they do draft a quarterback, the thing that kind of off the field stuff that they will learn is how to be a grade A professional, because from the very beginning, that is what Matt Ryan has been. He has been the face of the franchise. He has been a spokesman, but he also does the things on the field that you would expect from your franchise player. One of my favorite things to watch kind of during training camp, during practices, things like that, is the moments when Kurt Benkert is doing the offense, when it's the scout team or it's kind of your third team guys getting their red zone reps or something, is Matt Ryan and Matt Schaub would be off on field 2 or 3, basically running suicide drills. And they would just be by themselves, conditioning, doing extra work. And it's, you kind of will hear stories about certain players or things like that where their work ethic wasn't, what was necessarily expected of them. Matt Ryan is very much a first in the building, last guy out type of person. And he's the type of person who does what's needed throughout the week to win on Sundays. And if nothing else, like that would be very, very beneficial for a rookie quarterback to just watch that for a year and say, this guy's a former league MVP. That's what he's still doing. That's what I need to do to get to that level, because your talent isn't enough in this league. Everybody in the NFL is in the top 1% of what they do. So it's the other parts of your character that really define you and allow you to succeed. And so if nothing else, that would be very beneficial and would be probably a pro for why should the Falcons take a quarterback before they need one. It's because they will then have the opportunity to really set that player up for success during their career because they get to learn underneath. And it doesn't even need to be a hands-on thing for Matt Ryan's part. It's just like, hey, kid, just sit back and watch and model what you do after what this guy does.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's one of the things. I think we're throughout the organized. Obviously, we've only been fans for a couple of years, but I think drafting Matt Ryan, drafting Julio, drafting Jarrett, drafting Ridley, we sat, and then you have like they're the ones that are still here, and they're the ones that are top pros, not just top players, but top pros in themselves. I think with you go to like Tat McKinley and a few other Beasley, etc. They've gone now, and because they was obviously not the pros he wanted in. He thought he was, but he wasn't, and they've gone. But we've kept all the top pros throughout, and I think going through this draft might be like, even though this one guy might be slightly better, or they might think he's slightly better, it might be like a personalization stuff. Like I think he suits our team, and I think that's what Thomas Dimitrov did do quite well in the last, since he was here. So I think I'd like that to carry on. That's the only thing from him, but I think that's the thing. I think if you take the personalization bit from people, I think that's a massive step going forward.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the Falcons filter there. But I like one of my favorite stories that I heard kind of over the years was and I think this speaks to the NFL's just different because this story involves Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. And coming out, I mean, they obviously traded a king's ransom for Julio because they realized what kind of just physical alien this man is. His first practice, though, he was running a route, and basically it was just kind of a curl route, come back, whatever. And he hits his plant foot, turns back, is getting ready for the ball. The ball hit him in the face mask. He wasn't ready for the ball. Matt Ryan threw it so early that it hit Julio in the face before he could get his hands up. And it was kind of a welcome to the NFL moment for Julio Jones, the most like physically gifted receiver on the face of the earth. And it was like at Alabama, he was ready before the quarterback ever was because that's how good he is. In the NFL, no, you got to be ready immediately because the quarterback is going to put it there on a dot right when it needs to be there. So you better prep to his level and his expectation. And so I think that's just kind of another example of whoever they get at 4, it's not just the physical side of things that they're going to be looking at. It's got to be that mental makeup. It's got to be, is this person going to come in wanting to be the best that they can be? Because Terry Fontenot also had a firsthand seat with Drew Brees for the past decade and a half. I mean, he and Drew Brees is that exact same type of player. So those two guys are going to know really well what needs to be done if they decide to go with a quarterback. Yeah,
absolutely. That leads us pretty nicely, to be fair. I was going to ask for your takes on Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot. So are you feeling they're the right men for the job? Are you satisfied with it, or?
Yeah, no, I really like Terry Fontenot, and I feel like I'm doing like Arthur Smith dirty or something, just like always starting and leading off with Terry Fontenot, which is not my intention in any way, shape, or form. It's just that's how I don't know, electrifying Terry Fontenot's first press conference was. Is he was just so gregarious and warming and smart. And I think that dude, he would be somebody who I would want leading an organization. I think that even though the Saints are obviously the Falcons' biggest rivals, there's no denying what they've done and really how they had 3 straight 7-9 seasons. And it was kind of a question that I asked Terry Fontenot in his opening press conference is, what were the lessons that you guys took from those 3 non-playoff seasons? Because the Falcons now find themselves 3 non-playoff seasons and they turn things around really quickly. And basically it was like you had to take a really hard look at the roster because things obviously weren't working out. You needed to self-evaluate to a level that wasn't working previously and kind of make some tough decisions, get some new blood in there. And I think that's what we're going to see the Falcons do in these next coming weeks and months. So from that perspective, he's got the experience to get things moving in the right direction based on where this organization is right now. And he's got history working with some cap difficulties. You know, Drew Brees obviously has been kind of the biggest example in the NFL with his cap is just an anchor weighing everything down. And so they kind of find themselves in a similar spot now and are going to have to navigate that. Arthur Smith is somebody who you kind of can't deny the results that he had in Tennessee. Tennessee went from probably one of the most, not boring offenses, but just like an afterthought when it came to kind of teams. And then they turned into a team that everybody was excited to kind of watch on a weekly basis. And anytime there was a breakaway in a game and it was like, all right, now we're going over to Tennessee and Indianapolis. And it was like a Derrick Henry giant run or an AJ Smith, like big touchdown. Like he made that offense fun and exciting. And I think that he's coming to an offense with, even though they don't have a Derrick Henry, he's got more than enough weapons at his disposal to make this offense really fun and exciting. Not that it wasn't already, but I think it'll be just way more dynamic and explosive. So I like the marriage. It's an opposite of personalities. Arthur Smith is much more like, for as fun as his offenses are, he's much more reserved, kind of quiet, goes about his business type of person. At least he strikes me in that way. And I watched a few of his press conferences while he was with the Titans, and it doesn't change whether he's being introduced as a head coach or he's in week 4 of a season or he's preparing for an AFC playoff game. Like he just kind of comes with the same level, and that could be just media like training or whatever. But I like the two of them. Obviously the results are what is going to matter, but first impressions were really positive.
Yeah, definitely. Just coming off the back of your comment about Arthur then, I kind of got the similar impression. I'd not really watched any previous press conferences, and then I watched the one, like the unveiling of him, and I thought, he's awfully reserved and awfully like calm and quiet. I thought at the time, I was like, I want a bit more like get up and go. But then I watched back and I agree with what you said, like that is just his persona, that is his person. So I was like, right, I was probably a little bit harsh to prejudge him. I thought like, is he nervous? Is he scared? Like, surely he should be ready for this. And then when I watched back, I was like, oh, that's just him. So I'm fine with it. I think it's a good appointment.
Yeah, no, I mean, you get so used to DQ and kind of his just energy that he brings that anybody else probably feels a little bit more reserved by comparison. But a big thing that, I know kind of the comms team with the Falcons previously, they've always wanted somebody to be themselves. Don't say anything that you wouldn't naturally say, and don't try to be somebody that you naturally aren't. Like everything that DQ did was because that's who DQ is, on or off the camera. I mean, when he was sitting there talking to us on a Friday afternoon with no cameras around and just kind of coming up and being like, all right, hey guys, like here's who's going to be in the game. Here's who we're holding out. Here's who's good to go. All that stuff, like exact same energy as if he was talking to 45 people at the end of the year press conference. I mean, so I just get the sense that that's who Arthur Smith is. The dude cares about ball, and that's how it is.
Definitely. I think one thing going on to back to Smith as well, I think the appointment, I think he was at the Titans for so long, but every time they got a new coach and new staff, he was always there. So he kept him on. So that obviously proves that he's obviously a guy people wanting to keep on. Obviously, most of the time, look at what we've done. We've removed basically everyone from the building, get like one person. But because he got kept on every single time, I think it does prove a lot in him. So I think that is a massive point as well.
Yeah. And I know one Tennessee writer, I guess, like kind of while Arthur Smith was getting some of these like head coaching looks, was basically giving Mike Vrabel credit for discovering Arthur Smith. And he was just like, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. Like, I didn't discover Arthur Smith. Like Arthur, when I was hired, I think it was like Mike Mularkey or somebody. It was like those guys came to me and they were like, you need to keep this dude on your staff. He's really talented. He is good at his job. He would be a great addition to your staff. And you're right. I mean, the fact that Arthur Smith has hung around, because coaching is such a fraternity. all these guys want their guys. And I think it's telling too that a lot of the staff that he's building in Atlanta on the offensive side and defensive side of the ball, they've got connections to the Titans. It's clear that, the connections that he's made throughout his years as a coach, he respects these guys. He wants them to be here, and he's building a staff of guys that he's comfortable with. But as he also said in his opening press conference, he doesn't want it to be a just kind of a think tank. He doesn't want a bunch of yes men. He wants guys that are going to push and do different things and challenge his ideas. And that's where I think the hiring of Dave Ragone is really interesting, because he kind of comes from that Matt Nagy, Andy Reid style of offense, which isn't the Shanahan coaching tree and the Matt LaFleur and all that stuff. So it'll be interesting. I think there's going to be a weird blend of some of that downfield, vertical, wide open passing attack that Andy Reid likes to do, and this tight motion play act, get guys moving stuff that Shanahan and Arthur Smith and LaFleur have done over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, do you want to jump in?
just listening on, man. Just listening on. No, I'm with you on that last seg. I think it just from my general perception, it seems like they're going to be leaning more towards the Shanahan style offense, because Matt's always like he's always excelled with the rollout, from long before Shanahan showed up in Atlanta. I hate the perception that he doesn't have a big arm, because he can throw it, but it seems like you naturally want to lean towards more of the Shanahan-esque tree right now, right? At least that's my perception.
Yeah, I think that's how the offense was built previously. Like a lot of the guys that when they moved, or when Kyle left and they brought in Sark, they purposefully wanted to stick with that offense. They made the point of saying, this isn't a Kyle Shanahan offense, this is a Falcons offense, and we're going to ask Sark to run kind of the same things. The way they drafted, getting guys like Chris Lindstrom, Matt Hennessy as like an Alex Mack replacement, those guys are much better on the move than they are just like a power run inside zone scheme. You want those guys out in space. What's interesting, and I remember, I think it was the Ringer NFL show, and Kevin Clark telling a story about when Kyle came to Atlanta, something that Matt had not previously done and wasn't necessarily comfortable with, was turning his back to the defense. He was the type of quarterback who wanted to, as he was dropping back, look at the defense, see what the defense was doing, because he didn't want to have to turn back around and then reread what was in front of him. Kyle coached that out of him and basically said, here are the advantages to turning in order to really sell that it's a run, you've got to, as a quarterback, make it look like it's a run. And when it's a run play, you're turning your back to the defense. So I think that over the past couple of seasons with Dirk, that wasn't used as much. One of the things that I'm really curious about seeing, and it'll let me know a little bit about how serious Arthur Smith is about kind of really implementing that style of offense back here in Atlanta, is, how much do we see Matt Ryan kind of turning his back to the defense and really selling those outside zone runs, those like toss sweeps, things like that are such a staple of the run game with this scheme.
Yeah. And with that said, you got to expect that Fontenot and Arthur Smith are prizing a running back in the draft, right? That has to be a thing.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was actually talking with somebody earlier today. Like that's a position group that I think is going to be really fascinating to see what happens with it, because obviously Thomas drafted a lot of running backs over recent years, Brian Hill, Ito Smith, Quadri, like all of those guys. Are they here in 2021, or is it kind of a clean house type of situation? Because, none of those guys have developed into the number one running back. That's not to say that they can't do. I think had Ito not been dealing with some injuries over recent years, maybe he would have had a shot at having kind of like a Devontae Freeman type of rise, because they've got similar skill sets. Brian Hill obviously has kind of the biggest bursts and splashes of the group, where he would break off a random 140-yard game when given the opportunity. But I would be very interested in seeing how other teams viewed the Falcons' backfield. Now, obviously, it's a stretch to say that they should just go get Derrick Henry. There aren't Derrick Henrys that grow on trees.
No.
And I don't think this is the strongest running back class in the draft, but I think that there are some good players that you can get on day 2, in maybe, you know, the second, third round, probably even the 4th round. And that's where the value of the running back position really should be. You know, we're not taking Najee Harris at 4. Even if you trade back to 17, don't take Najee Harris at 17. I mean, last year, had he come out, people were talking about Travis Etienne as probably the best running back in the draft. He's in this year's draft, and everybody's, you know, falling in love with Najee. If he's the second running back off the board, if Travis is the second running back off the board, he could be a steal. Both guys coming out of North Carolina are really good players. So it's a position where I think they can definitely find their guy. They could also go and look in free agency and probably get somebody relatively cheap. But again, they're not going to have much money to spend in free agency. And I think your best bet is to get a young running back, use them for their first 4 years, find another guy, and kind of rinse and repeat.
That's what running backs do.
Yeah. Yep. Burn them and churn them.
Do you want to add anything, James?
I was just going to say, like, when watching the Falcons last season, like, no team seemed to like fear the run game. And how do you think Smith is going to? Is he just going to come in, wave a magic wand, and here we are? We've got 100-yard rushing games week in, week out.
Well, I think so. This is where coaching really does play a role, because everybody talks about, you know, scheme when it comes to coaching, and it's really kind of X's and O's oriented. But the best coaches are the best teachers, you know, on the field throughout the week at practice, saying, no, put your hand here, not here, because you'll get better leverage. Or, you know, when you're moving, you want to cross your legs instead of shuffling, or you want to shuffle instead of crossing your legs because you've got a better base and you're going to be harder to move, things like that. It's all about the way that you teach things. So one of the things that I've always heard, and Kyle left before I got here, but Kyle would coach the run game like insistently throughout the week. Just the amount of attention and preparation and detail that he would put into the run game as opposed to the pass game probably would be surprising to people. But because his pass game was so the run game and everything had to look the exact same, you need your pass plays to look like run plays. So coach the run plays. And the connection that the running backs have to have with the offensive line, and everybody's got to move as one in that outside zone scheme, which again, I believe is what Arthur Smith plans to kind of use here, is really important. And I think there was a disconnect there in recent years. You know, the number of times that we would see kind of Tevin Coleman not ever cut up field, you know, the defense would string him out to kind of the sideline, and then he'd run out of bounds and it was a 2-yard gain. Or I think Dirk brought in a bit more inside zone than they had previously been running. And I don't know if that was to the strength of the offensive line. So no, it's not as simple as waving a magic wand, but it is in what you stress throughout the week. And I think that with more attention to detail in how they block the run and how the running backs, you know, approach where the hole is, what their setup is, you know, when to bounce it, things like that. I do think that can be fixed, even if you kind of keep the same personnel in place.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Derrick Henry wasn't exactly burning the league down before Arthur Smith took control, right? I mean, he was good. He was always good. But I remember seeing a Titans game the year the Falcons actually, you know, made their Super Bowl run. Weirdly enough, I went to Tennessee and saw them play Cleveland that year, which was just an awful game. But I mean, he was there, and I think he was the backup, and it was just kind of like, you know, people knew about him from Alabama, but it wasn't really a big deal. But really, when Arthur Smith took over is when Derrick Henry exploded.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean, I think, you know, obviously you want to give the player some credit for that.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right, because there was a little bit of this, I guess, the part of the conversation around Alabama running backs was their production in college relative to their production in the NFL. You know, they were lighting up college football and then coming out, and it was kind of like, well, is Nick Saban just using them to the point where they have nothing left once they get to the NFL? You know, you think of like Mark Ingram at that point was probably the most accomplished Alabama running back, but obviously Trent Richardson is the big example, and then I'm blanking on his name, but or Eddie Lacy up in Green Bay was kind of, all right, maybe they've got one good year in them, but then they quickly kind of fall off the cliff. So Derrick Henry was viewed as, again, this physical freak, this specimen, but his production, to your point, hadn't been there yet. And it was a little bit of like, what's wrong with these Alabama running backs? Now, that was still early in his career. It was kind of like year one, year two. But that's also when you'd expect running backs to probably be their most productive in the NFL.
Absolutely.
That's a position where you can come out in your rookie year, you can run for 1,300 yards. So yes, I do think Arthur Smith, and kind of to my point, is it's about how you coach the run game, not necessarily all about the players that you have at your disposal.
Right.
We've got a few. Yeah, I was just going to pop.
Oh goodness.
I don't know. It's a really good question. I would say, I mean, safety is probably a position where it's not going to be the most expensive thing to tag. But with tagging, I mean, you're a couple of things. I mean, you're not able to work with the cap as much as you could just signing a guy to a deal. You're not able to manipulate, because if you tag, that's all in your cap year one. And it's out of your control how expensive that is, because it's a combination of, I think, the top 5 contracts or whatever at that position. And so the other thing is how does Keanu Neal fit into this new defense? Dean Pease has said that he wants to be multiple and versatile, but Keanu Neal is the prototypical cover 3 box safety. That's the thing he's very best at. You know, when Raheem Morris and Jeff Ulbrich took over and they started using him more in that you're our downfield player, you're patrolling that kill zone, which is kind of like the shallow mesh area of the field, and you're going to run and hit. That's what he does best. Yeah. Dean Pease has traditionally liked that too high safety look, because that's where you can really be multiple. You can have both of those guys. You can run robber, you can drop, you can go cover 4, cover 2. You could still go cover 1, cover 3, and drop a guy down late. You could blitz somebody. So it's all about Keanu's skill set. So that comes down to a point of coaching. I mean, but for financial reasons, I don't know if that's the guy that they bring. I wouldn't be surprised actually if they don't use the franchise tag this year, because again, for the reasons of it's all on your cap in year one. So all of the work that they're going to have to do to clear cap space, if you're franchise tagging Keanu and his hit is $6 million this year, kind of all, like, I don't even know if they're going to be able to free up $6 million in French. And then you're still going to have to sign all your draft picks and fill out some guys on this roster. So at some point it kind of becomes a problem. Now, Keanu may be such a priority to Dean Pease and Arthur Smith and how they want their defense to run that, yes, they will do whatever they can to free that space up. But I think if that's the situation, they would probably sign him to an extension and roll out the cap hit to really take effect in year 2 or year 3 rather than franchise tagging him.
I think it could be more of a team-friendly deal. Obviously, he had a full season last year, but obviously with his injuries before, maybe a couple of years, but obviously basically stay fit and you might get a extra next year, etc.
I mean, it could be. I think if he hits the open market, I would really look at Dallas. I
was going to say, we're going to get into a bidding war with DQ.
Yeah. I mean, DQ coached him at Florida, took a chance with him, first round draft pick when a lot of people kind of saw Keanu as maybe a later in the first round, possibly a round 2 guy. They've got a great relationship. I mean, Keanu is one of my favorite players in the locker room, somebody who I've had a lot of conversations with. What's fascinating with him is, for as ferocious as he is on the field, he's very soft-spoken, extremely kind, and really just thoughtful off of the field. Almost like overwhelmingly humble, like embarrassed that you want to come up and like talk to him. And then on game day, the dude, like the look in his eyes, he looks like a shark. And it's just like, I don't want to go anywhere near you. So, I mean, if Keanu is not here this fall, I will be sad, but I will wish him, nothing but the best. And I think right now, as it stands, I think there's probably a better chance that he's somewhere else than he is in Atlanta. But the beauty of this game is that you can continue to watch players wherever they are. And we should all remain Keanu Neal fans, regardless of where he's playing.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Unless he goes to New Orleans, right?
Unless he goes to New Orleans, all bets are off.
Whilst we're talking about players moving on, we've got another question about the same sort of principle. There we go. Likelihood of Falcons releasing James Cap.
I mean, at this point, he'd be the player that would save them, again, the most money. What's interesting with their cap situation is there aren't any like notable guys that they could release to save a bunch of money. I mean, they could do a couple. I think you're allowed 2 post June 1 cuts, and that's where they would save probably a substantial amount. So it wouldn't be surprising if we do see a bigger name guy get let go and designated as a post June 1. But James Carpenter is a player who they could save like $4.5 million releasing now.
Yeah.
But I think they save like $5 million or something if they designate him a post June. So if he is the next domino to fall, again, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm interested in the fact that they haven't done so already. You know, I kind of expected the Ricardo Allen, Alan Bailey, James Carpenter news all to come together because they all three fit that category of like, these are just the veterans who, you know, aren't necessarily the most impactful players on this roster, even though, you know, I think I don't mean that at all as a slight to Ricardo, who I do think is extremely valuable to this team and has been throughout his career. But those are the 3 veteran guys that you could save money. So the fact that he wasn't part of that group made me think a little bit, you know, do they view him as an asset at left guard? And instead of creating another hole that you need to plug, is it worth just paying that money this year to keep James Carpenter in place? Because it's not worth, you know, having another problem to fix. So that'll be curious to continue to watch as things kind of unfold. But again, I think he would make sense as the next guy to be released. It just made me hesitate a little bit when his name wasn't part of the other 2.
I think that's a very good point. As in, like, it still could happen. Like, obviously, you're saying, then you look at it like you might have, if you end up drafting someone in that position, if you do get rid, we could have, I think, quite a very new O line. If you look at it, you've still got Hennessy who's going to be centre. You got Lindstrom, McGarry. So it could be a very. It just depends what happens, obviously, in the draft. And they might be looking at it like, if we keep him for this year, at least we have some more experience just for this year. But it's one of them where I think in the whole organisation, we don't really know what's going to happen. If you're going back to the draft, anything can happen. We could trade down and go quarterback, cornerback, literally anything. I think that's like the exciting part of being a Falcons fan at the moment.
Yeah,
his and Jamon Brown's fit never made sense to me though.
James made more sense to me than Jamon did.
Sure,
but like if you were gonna grab a guy that you needed to plug in there, like he made doing both of them together was kind of weird.
Then drafting 2 offensive linemen.
Yeah, it was like they were just like throwing everything at a problem to try to fix it, which. Yeah, I talked to Thomas and a big thing for him was like it's about the strength of the group as a whole as opposed to just the individual talent of each offensive lineman. So from that perspective, it makes a little bit more sense, their approach. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of a head scratcher for me at the time, was bringing both of those guys in at one spot and then also drafting 2 more guys. Now, if they do move on from James Carpenter, it makes the options at 4 a little bit more probably expansive, because outside of quarterback, I think offensive tackle is probably for the top end talent, maybe wide receiver as well. I really like Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith. Those guys are incredible. But Penei Sewell is, some people consider like the second best player in this draft. So if you move on from James Carpenter and draft a tackle, you know, maybe you kick Jake Matthews in, maybe you kick Caleb McGarry in, maybe you play that rookie tackle at guard. I mean, that would, I think, open up one more possibility at 4. And that's not to say that they won't go tackle anyway. But yeah, I mean, James Carpenter will be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I think that could be an indication is if we do get rid, then you're looking at like Sewell at number 4 pick, because I don't think if we didn't take him, I don't think he'd be going past the Bengals at 5.
Yeah.
So
not after Burrow got hurt this year.
Exactly.
If I'm Stincy, I'm cranking everything, and I'm pulling a Thomas Dimitroff and drafting as many offensive linemen as I can.
I think you can see that happening. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to trade up just to make sure they got him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about what is Miami wanting to do at 3 there, because they kind of are in the same boat a little bit. If they think 2 is the answer, grab that top left tackle. So, in that sense, the Jets are in prime position. If they think that maybe there's not going to be a run on quarterbacks and they could move back to 5 and still land, Zach Wilson or Fields, because that would be kind of a realistic possibility. If you get Cincinnati trade up to 2, take an offensive lineman, you're hearing Miami's going to take an offensive lineman, and the Falcons, then you've got 3 quarterbacks still on the board. Even if the Falcons take one of them, if you think it's a toss-up between Fields or Wilson, why wouldn't you, if you're the Jets, move back and get kind of the second guy of that group if you like all of them? I mean, so that'd be fascinating.
Or just blow everyone's minds, keep Darnold, and just get all your picks.
Yeah, there you go.
Could you see a situation where the Falcons drop a 4th or 5th rounder to the Jets if they draft a quarterback to get Darnold here to sit behind Matt?
I would not want that, but just because it's so exciting to just go with a rookie from a narrative standpoint. Just go with somebody who's starting from scratch. No, I think the Falcons need all of the draft capital this year that they can get.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Just go. I'm waiting for the chat to explode in about 4 seconds.
We had a few, yeah.
That's why it's brought up. We have a very heavy Sam Darnold fan that is a regular on our show, so that is the topic of conversation every time you can slip it in. Something I kind of bounced over earlier that we kind of skimmed over. What do you think of the draft from last year? Are you hopeful on any? I mean, obviously AJ grew into the season and he was probably the best shout of all of them, but is there anyone else? Are you satisfied with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of outstanding question marks. Obviously, Marlon Davidson and Matt Hennessy, your 2nd and 3rd round picks. Those guys, it's almost like you can't really give the draft a grade yet because those guys didn't play for much of the season. And usually, hitting on your 1st round pick is obviously very important, but whether it's a good or usually comes down to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. If you can get somebody, I think guys like Russell Gage and Foye are salvaging that. Were they 2017, 2018 class is looking really strong because, now you've got Calvin, you've got Russell Gage, you've got Foye. So that's a pretty good draft. You get 3 good starters out of it. If Matt Hennessy and Marlon Davidson can really develop, then I think it'll look like a pretty solid, especially defensive draft. Because that's been the Falcons have been really good offensively, but not since kind of 2016 have they had a really solid defensive draft, and they need that, especially with the way Michael Walker kind of played throughout the season. And that was another miss of mine. I wasn't a huge fan of Michael Walker and Jalen Hawkins on day 3 because, from my perspective, Michael Walker was like a little bit of an in-betweener, but not in the way that the Falcons traditionally use their guys. You understand if they're going to go with an in-betweener like safety linebacker, but he was kind of an in-between like 3-4 edge rusher linebacker, which didn't necessarily make sense for their scheme, but I think it makes perfect sense for Dean Pease and what he wants to do. So I think Michael Walker is really in great shape moving forward because he's got that rush experience and can also cover like you would need like a 3-4 outside linebacker to be able to do. So he's somebody that I'm much more bullish on. I think AJ Terrell, while he gave up some plays, he was never like dusted. He was always at the point of the catch and at least contesting it. It's just that some receivers made some of the best catches probably of their season against AJ Terrell. But if you're going to consistently stress guys to have to do that, I like your chances long term. I think more often than not, you're going to come up on the winning side if you're making guys have to make ridiculous catches all afternoon against you. So I think AJ Terrell has a chance to be a very good corner in this league. And if he is, that might be all you need right there for it to be a good draft, because corner is one of the most valuable positions in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think going back to when you said, like, obviously he wasn't perfect all year, but obviously he was going to be in the rookie season anyway. But when you get in, he got battered at times. Like, our edges, I think we need an edge rusher. But when you're not putting so much pressure on a quarterback, your secondary is going to get pounded, and I think that's when he stepped up a lot. Even though he's got pounded every game, he did very well considering he's getting hit shot after shot after shot.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, one of my favorite games for AJ was the Minnesota Vikings game, and the very first play of that game, and I wrote about it, I think, for after further review, was there was a motion with Justin Jefferson where they basically like did a yo-yo motion, brought him across the formation and then back, and AJ had him in man coverage. And so as they brought him back and you see AJ start to do it, they snapped the ball, but AJ's got to run through basically all of the linebackers to get over to him. And then they threw a quick like little screen pass to him on the flat, and AJ dropped him for a 2-yard loss. And he did that while having to run through the entire defense, cut and make the tackle upfield. And I was like, this dude can play. I mean, that's even amongst NFL players. Like, if you're able to, because that's something the Falcons haven't had at the corner position, especially, is just guys who like naturally could make plays. You just need a playmaker at the cornerback position. And I think AJ Terrell is absolutely a playmaker at the cornerback position, both against the run and against the pass.
And he also laid that hit on Stafford, if I'm not wrong, that got called for roughing the passer, which was the biggest bullshit of the season. But no, it's not. That's not the biggest bullshit of the season. Sorry.
Plenty of us.
I saw a tweet dug up a couple of days ago that said, haha, the Falcons really just drafted this guy. And it was him just getting blown away by a UNC receiver. And then the follow-up question, the follow-up guy just goes, yeah, that didn't age well, did it? That guy's the man.
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of my previous point about quarterbacks. Is like AJ Terrell was starting from his freshman year for Clemson, who played in every single college football playoff against the best receivers in the country. Like, just take guys. College and the NFL have never been, I think, more closely aligned and linked with some of the stuff that we're seeing the NFL start to finally accept and run at it in the NFL level. And so if guys are productive in college, I think we're seeing that carry over more. Yeah, it used to be like, oh, this guy played in an NFL style offense in college, so therefore he's more attractive to NFL teams. NFL teams are now running RPOs. NFL teams are now running half field reads. NFL teams are now running spread offense. Like, it's just, there's so much more overlap. So I'm always going to lean towards, hey, if this guy did it at the college level to a high degree year after year, I don't doubt that he's going to have similar success in the NFL. And I think AJ Terrell, again, is proof of that.
Without a doubt. Oh, just checking the comment about him. Terrell will be fine, actually. Very true. I'm sure there's an article going about at the moment in time saying that the Falcons could be playing 10 brand new quarterbacks next season, looking at how the teams that we got lined up are all shaping up. So we don't even know what to expect at the moment in time.
We'll make them look like superstars in every game.
Strength of schedule looks fantastic for next year for the first time in a long time, though. Nothing's more nauseating than seeing that first article. It's like the Falcons have the second hardest schedule this year. I'm like, my God, they went 4-12 last year. How was that fair?
Well, that's where it really is like that. The difference between like the Falcons being at the 4 spot in the NFC South and the Panthers being at the 3 spot is like one game, but that could be the difference between, facing a team who had a down, because that was the issue I think with the Falcons in, maybe it was 2019. They were technically second in the NFC South because they had the head-to-head against Tampa, and they better record than the Panthers. And so it's kind of like, well,
and that damn pick six.
Yeah, exactly.
As soon as it went off, I'm like, that was useless. And now we got to play Seattle next year. This sucks.
Yeah. So you're playing teams who maybe had a great year, but just were in a great division. And so now they're second in their division, but they're going to the playoffs, or they had a down year and now you expect them to bounce back like Dallas or whatever. So, I mean, it was one of those, but the pick six I loved because every year Dion has at least one defensive touchdown. So when he's like salvaged that, because it's something I've been just like keeping in the back of my mind ever since his rookie year. I'm like, God, every single season this guy has a defensive touchdown, and he did it, and I was so happy.
I got to say, I'm really stoked on our linebackers right now. Like, just looking, like, that's the one, like, position group where I keep going, all right, like, we're doing good. You know, we got Dion. I know Dion's not been, like 2017 was his, like, peak, right? But he's not been bad ever since then. He's been very, very good still. Foye exploded. Michael Walker, like you said, could be coming out and doing something really, so I got no problem with linebackers. We just need a line, man. We just need our plan.
Yeah, and I mean, it's part of the thing, I think, like everybody's viewing Dante Fowler as somebody who could be a post-June 1 cut for the savings. I think that Dante actually fits this defense pretty well. Yeah. And I could see him, staying on as that other 3-4 outside linebacker, kind of stand-up pass rusher opposite of Michael Walker. So even though, yes, his contract wasn't probably the best based on his production last season, and it looks a little bit daunting, and a lot of people are probably in favor of moving on from Dante Fowler. I would not be surprised if this staff, views him at least as a short-term part of the puzzle. Because again, you can't release everybody. You can't open up so many holes because they don't have the finances right now to really even fill the holes that they have. So I'd look at him sticking around.
Just a question on Dante Fowler. He did so well in LA with Donald next to him, and then he comes to us, and it just seemed like his attitude wasn't right, and then it seemed like he wasn't playing 100%. Was he? Do you think he was running injured most of the season?
Yeah, he was absolutely running. I mean,
I think he said it, didn't he?
Yeah, he told us. But he, it was not one of those things where he was using it as an excuse. It was just kind of, and like that's the sucky thing about the NFL is like all of these guys are always playing injured. And there really is a difference because again, everybody here is at the best 1% of what they do. If you're at 70%, like that, sometimes, especially for defensive linemen and defensive ends, if you're kind of a speed rusher, and he was dealing, I believe, with either a groin or a hamstring throughout the year, or maybe it was his foot, but any of those three, if your burst off the line isn't what it traditionally is, not only are you not playing the way that you usually feel, like your gauge for like what you need to do on a given play is off because your body isn't responding in the way that it always has throughout your life. But, your just the eye test looks off. And that's where like I feel for Tack a little bit, because I think that was the case for much of his career, where the dude played as hard as he could. And I separate him from Vic Beasley, even though, a lot of fans like to lump them together. Like, I don't think work ethic was an issue with Tack. I think really he just unfortunately was getting hurt a lot of the time, and the production just wasn't there. And then maturity a little bit. But yeah, I do think that was the case with Dante. James was just, he was playing injured for most of the year, if not all of it.
Man, Tack had me on my feet this year. Did we open the season with him sacking Russell Wilson? Like, I'm pretty sure he hit him just like pure on, nobody around him. I like jumped up. That was like the most excited I was all season, was that one moment. And like I've always loved Tack, and that was my my redemption moment. Like, he's coming in, he's getting 11 sacks. This is his year, and like then it just kind of peeled out. But I do feel for him because like he had me from like draft night. I love that dude, and it sucks. And now I hear that we should have taken TJ Watt, and shoulda is really easy to talk about, but it does suck for him. Is he still under contract with anybody right now? Is he with Tennessee still?
Did he not go to the Raiders?
It's a good question. Yeah, he was with the Raiders, but
he was doing that awful thing where he would get picked up by a team, go through a physical, not get it, and then put up that tweet that's like, "I want to thank the fans. This is my best time ever," whatever. And then he did that like 6 times. So I don't really know where he went now, but
Just all-time petty. I love it.
He is, man.
I don't know if he's anywhere now.
If you were Smith and Pease for the defensive line, would you bring in someone like John Abrahams as a guest instructor, advisor, mentor for the D line and D ends especially?
Or Dwight Freeney, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
I mean, guys, they do that kind of all the time, all throughout training camp and stuff. They'll bring in a bunch of guys. I don't know if you would have somebody on your staff like that who's primarily just a pass rush coach, but they certainly will bring in former players. I would actually look at the whole position because, again, you're pretty strapped financially, very strapped financially, and this is not a great draft for edge rushers, especially proven edge rushers. The guys in the first round have talent, but they haven't proven it. And I think Rousseau kind of sitting out this year it makes sense, I guess, if you want to leave on a high note, but now a lot of people have questions about it because it's like, was it a 1-year wonder type of thing? And that can happen with pass rushers, but it's not a Brian Burns, Montez Sweat kind of, there's 4 or 5 pass rushers in the first round that you can grab. So it wouldn't shock me if the guys decide to bring in some veterans at like kind of the veteran minimum or near veteran minimum, but who are like high character, high motor, really good workers for the defensive line to show the younger guys that maybe if they do draft in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round to fill out their defensive line. Now you've got some veteran leaders who know their role is really to be here for 1 or 2 years, but you're more of a mentor and you're showing guys how to do things, kind of like Dwight Freeney, although I don't even think they're going to be able to get guys even to that level. But that's what I would look for them to probably do on the defensive line is go for the guys who really can show, and teach, in addition to probably bringing in, a Chuck Smith, John Abraham, those types of guys to coach them up during the offseason and training camp, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because we're pushing it for time a little bit, I think we'll have our last proper question and bit of a debate for him. What does a good season look like for the Falcons next year for you? I'm going to ask everyone actually, and then we'll wrap it up. But what's a good score-wise and performance-wise?
So, I mean, it's all like in the eye of the beholder, right? And it's a narrative thing a little bit. Like 8-8 looks much better coming off of a 4-12 season than it does especially with a new regime. If you go 8-8 with Dan Quinn and Thomas Mitroff 2 years after being in the Super Bowl, that's a bad season. That's a letdown. If you're 8-8 with a new staff in place, especially probably with roster limitations and things like that, everybody's going to look at that as a really good coaching job and reason. And all of a sudden people will be saying the Falcons are going to be contenders in 2022. I think even a little less than 8-8 is probably still a good season. I think the Panthers are actually an interesting example for this because they had a much better year than it probably looks from just a record perspective. They were competitive in pretty much all of their games, and they did so without their best player on offense on the field for all but 3 games. So I think almost wins and losses shouldn't matter unless they shock everybody and kind of go on a playoff run. At that point, yes, wins and losses very much matter. But it's more to me about like a culture and attitude thing. Like what do your eyes tell you on the field on Sundays? How does this team look? How do they play? Are they getting blown out? Are they close? Do they get better as the year goes along? So I would put more emphasis on just the culture they're establishing inside of the building and the way that they're playing on Sundays, as opposed to just looking at the wins and the losses. It's a little bit of a cop-out answer. I'm just going to say, all right, to put a number on it, if they are 7-9, but like a tight, contested, good 7-9, and we feel, with some good wins over some teams, some road wins, things like that, that will tell me that things are headed in the right direction. But who knows? I mean, they still have talent. They could make a surprise playoff run. But I think it's less about the expectations in the record than just how does this team perform on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as it stands, I'm at about the same. I said 7 and 9. Well, I said 7 and 10 if we get that extra game and everything, that whatever happens with that.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Whatever happens with that. But then I know as the season draws closer, I'll be saying it's win now mode. We're going to the Super Bowl, and that'll be my mentality. So
that's how it works.
Exactly. Unless anyone else has got anything just before we wrap it up, we'll call it a night. We don't want to take too much of Will's day because it's midday for him, so we're well out of time. And the same for you, Greg.
All I was going to say is, as long as we don't show up on First Take again, getting made fun of for not remembering how an onside kick works, I'm pretty good with this season. Because I am so tired of Stephen A. Smith making fun of the Falcons mercilessly.
I would take that. That's an improvement. One more win and not featuring in any bloopers videos yet. I'm down for that. That's all good. That's all good.
No problem.
It's an offense, and if the defense doesn't leak points like it did last year, we're in the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think, did we say
quarterbacks?
Yeah.
Was
it only 8 games where we only lost by 1 score as well last year, or 7 or 8 games? So we didn't get battered in many games. So I think if it's similar like that, but you pick up 8 or 9 wins.
That's the thing, though. That's when, the Falcons are really good at losing in Falcons ways, right? It's, you get up by 40 points and all of a sudden you lose. It's never getting blown. It's rarely getting blown out. It's always like, man, all you have to do is fall on this onside kick and you got to win. And then we run the ball one after the ball for 10 yards and then fall on it, so.
And I think that's one of the big things this season. I think if we, in the first few games, if we have a big lead and we go on to win, I know we did it against the Raiders last year, but if we do that a couple of times, I think that's a massive thing throughout the organisation, the mentality of sort of not blowing a lead, not creating a loss that's never been created again. So I think if we get a couple of wins like that, I think that'd be a massive thing.
Yeah. And Greg, I think like your point is this team isn't maybe as far off as the record certainly indicates. I mean, I think the reason I'm a little bit more probably pessimistic is because of the way that the finances currently are working. Like, you're going to have to get worse to even get under the salary cap. So for me, it's all about like, what does the roster look like in June or July? And then I think that it's probably more feasible to give a better answer. It's just, I think they're going to have to peel back some of the layers on this roster. And it's all about how do you replace that? And then how does coaching make up for it? But if things stand relatively pat, there's talent on this team. It wouldn't surprise me if especially if they keep kind of that extra playoff spot moving forward, like they could sneak in as wild card. And from there, everything is fair game. But yeah, I think I'm just a little bit on the pessimistic side because of the shape the roster is probably going to be in going into training camp. But I could be wrong. I've been wrong many times before.
And one more drop in. If Matt Ryan can beat Tom Brady for the first time in his career, that would be a good season for me. Just take him down one time.
Yeah. I won't hold my breath on anything this early on yet. I'm going to wait to see what happens in the draft, see a little bit of free agency, and then, like I said, then I'll let the hype take over me, and I'll say we're going 17-0. But we'll talk about that when it comes. Right. It's been a lot of fun, but we'll wrap up the show because I know everyone's got stuff to do, and people have been watching for a lot longer than we planned on right now. So, Will, thank you very much for coming on. It's been a lot of fun. We grilled you with questions, but it's still been fun.
No, it's been a blast.
You kind of just tee yourself up to come back on around draft time, just judging off your comments. So we'll keep in touch.
For sure.
Greg and James, thank you for coming on. And this is shameless, but I have to plug our merch. I know that a lot of you are seeing it on our Twitter at the moment. Me and Cal are very shamelessly advertising it. So we've got our own. So subscribe, follow us on Twitter and everything. And we'll tag everyone that's been on the show tonight in our post when we get it out afterwards. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for coming on. And we'll leave you all to it. Speak to you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.